I pretended to be submissive to my wife for 7 years, but it was all an act. Now, the moment had finally arrived. The day when Carla's ex-lover, Manuel Torres, returned. She had organized an impressive fireworks show by the river to welcome him. The atmosphere was perfect, and they even hugged and kissed in front of everyone. I stood there, silently observing. Carla had also arranged a welcome party for him. On the way to the party, she looked at me nervously and explained, "It's been so long since I saw Manuel. I was so emotional and kissed him." Irritated, I didn't respond immediately. I forced a smile and humbly said, "Of course, if you're happy, I'll accept anything." She gave me a slightly irritated look and turned away. I didn't know why she was worried. After all, I was nothing more than a worthless doormat. It was clear that I wouldn't have the courage to get angry. Manuel looked at me through the rearview mirror, mocking me. "Carla, this guy is useless. They humiliate him like that, and he doesn't even say a word. Isn't that enough for you? You should divorce him and marry me." I gripped the steering wheel tightly, glancing briefly at Carla. Her eyes shone, and I could swear she was a little emotional, but she remained silent for a long time, not responding. At the party, Carla's friends shouted excitedly, welcoming Manuel, but when they turned to look at me, their smiles quickly turned into mockery. Someone nearby began to speak, teasing me. Everyone knows Carla was in love with Manuel for 10 whole years. If it hadn't been for his sudden departure abroad, she wouldn't have been so fragile and heartbroken, falling in love with a loser who took advantage of the situation. Now that her true love is back, it's time for some people to realize and step back, don't you think? Thanks to Carla, no one at the party respected me, but I pretended not to notice. Silently, I watched Carla on the dance floor. Manuel took a sip of wine, pulled Carla toward him, and kissed her passionately. She timidly tried to return the kiss but realized her glass was empty. She turned to me and complained, "Javier, fill my glass, can't you see it's empty?" I rushed to pour more wine, but she pushed me away with disdain and went back to kissing Manuel. Suddenly, Manuel grabbed my arm, preventing me from leaving. He looked me up and down with contempt. "I'm really curious. How did you manage to fool such a noble woman like Carla into marrying you? Everyone says you're a loser, with no dignity. Show me how you lick her boots." He tilted the glass, letting a few drops fall onto his leather shoes, then with a cruel kick to my knee, forced me to kneel and crawl like a dog. Carla simply stood still, cold, watching. I gritted my teeth and kneeled, wiping Manuel's shoes with my sleeve while mocking laughter filled the air. I glimpsed Carla's gaze, filled with disdain. She walked up to me and kicked me hard. "You're pathetic, miserable. Get away from me." She paused and added, "I'll be with Manuel tonight." I immediately understood and silently booked a hotel room for them. I stood still. Carla's dress was half undone, and when she looked up and saw me, she became visibly irritated. "Why are you still here? Can't you see how disgusting you are?" I remained silent for a long time. When she was about to lose patience, hesitantly, I murmured, "I did everything right today, didn't I? Can I ask you for something? Please don't divorce me." Her expression changed to a mocking smile. "You, with not a shred of dignity, a useless man. How dare you want to stay with me? Why shouldn't I divorce you? Javier, listen well. I'm going to divorce you." The hallway was dimly lit. Carla could see the tears streaming down my face, but she didn't see my restrained smile. Without saying a word, she picked up a sandal from the floor. Without any respect, she threw it in my face. Then, the door slammed shut. Alone in the emptiness, I finally allowed myself to smile, free and unrestrained. I thought, divorce? No problem for me. Everyone was convinced I was completely in love with Carla. They thought I was a hopeless doormat. Carla took advantage of this supposed devotion, shamelessly humiliating me and venting her frustration on me whenever something didn't go as expected. But what she never imagined was that my relationship with her over these 7 years wasn't out of love, but rather a contract. That night, sitting in the car with Carla's mother, Letícia Martinez, she sighed deeply and said, "Javier, I know these 7 years haven't been easy for you. Now that the contract is over, find a way to end this relationship and regain your freedom. Just make sure Carla never finds out the truth. At the time, Carla was devastated after being abandoned by Manuel and had fallen into a critical state, even contemplating taking her own life in despair. Letícia decided to hire someone who could help her overcome the pain, stabilize her life, and eventually resume her career and studies. That's where I came in, newly graduated from a prestigious university, but drowning in debt and directionless. The offer was tempting, a 7-year contract with a salary of $5 million per year. I accepted without thinking much. My task was to play the role of a devoted husband, and now that the time was up, I could finally stop acting. After all this time, being the submissive man everyone saw, I was about to regain my life. When I arrived home that night, I found a package at the door. It came from Iliad, a remote region. Inside were finely carved wooden sculptures, carefully wrapped in protective foam. I couldn't help but smile when I saw them. It was a genuine smile, a rarity after years of pretending. That night, I slept deeply, something I hadn't done in a long time. The next morning, I received a message from Carla, something that hadn't happened in years. The message was cold and direct. Bring your ID. See you at the registry office. I sighed with relief and couldn't help but laugh all the way to the registry office. I laughed to myself, but when I saw her, I quickly changed my expression to one full of tears and began begging her not to divorce me. As always, Carla rolled her eyes and demanded that I apologize publicly. Without thinking, I did so immediately, but to my surprise, this only made her even angrier. With a slap that echoed, she stared at me and whispered through gritted teeth, "You're really pathetic, Javier. Don't you have any dignity?" The more I submitted to her whims, the more she seemed to despise me. Yet, when I ignored her, she was the one who came begging. It was hard to tell who was really the more pathetic one in this relationship. To ensure the divorce went smoothly, I decided to humiliate myself more than I ever had before. Carla, with a cold look, told me, "If you want us to stay married, swear. Swear that you'll never get involved between me and Manuel, that you'll let us do whatever we want. You're nothing but my pet." Without hesitation, I swore immediately, my eyes full of supposed sincerity, even trembling as I spoke. As more people gathered to watch the spectacle, Carla's expression grew even colder. It was clear that my level of submission was deeply arousing for her. Inside, I couldn't help but smile, thinking that the divorce was closer than ever. Finally, she said with disdain, "All right, let's not divorce. Let's go." What she thought was an act of kindness resounded in my ears like a devastating thunderclap. I stood still, staring at her, stunned, trying to understand how things had gotten so far. I came home that night, unable to stop thinking about what had just happened. Carla had refused to sign the divorce papers, even after everything I'd done to teach her the most absolute humiliation. My submission, which should have made her so disgusted she'd free me, somehow had the opposite effect. I slowly climbed the stairs, the weight of the situation bearing down on my shoulders, but inside, a fire burned. Something inside me told me it was time to end everything once and for all. That night, I sat down in the office I rarely used. I took from the back of a drawer an envelope Letícia had given me at the beginning of it all. Inside were the original documents of the contract that bound me to Carla for 7 long years. The papers still carried the perfume Letícia wore back then, a scent that reminded me of how everything began. 7 years, I whispered to myself. 7 years being the personal clown of a woman who never knew the truth, who treated me as nothing more than discarded furniture. The contract clearly stipulated that, at the end of the agreed period, I would be free to follow my life, and Letícia was to ensure Carla would not interfere. But what no one knew, not even Letícia, was that I had kept enough evidence to turn the game around if anything went wrong. Text messages, recorded conversations, and even financial records that could destroy Carla and her mother. In the blink of an eye, I was the submissive man, yes, but also the patient man. And patience was something Carla never had. The next day, Carla seemed colder than ever. When I entered the kitchen, she was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee, her eyes glued to her phone. She didn't even bother to look at me when I muttered a "good morning." I decided to break the silence. "Carla, we need to talk." She finally looked up, but her expression was one of pure boredom. "What is it now? Are you going to cry again? I already told you we're not getting divorced, so spare me your pathetic speech. I breathed deeply, trying to stay calm. On the outside, I was still the same Javier she was used to manipulating, but inside, something had changed. It's not about the divorce, it's about us, about what we're doing with our lives. She rolled her eyes and laughed with disdain. Our lives, Javier? You don't have a life. You're a parasite living off of me. What could you possibly have to say about that? I swallowed the provocation. It was exactly what she expected. Instead of responding, I simply gave a small smile and left the house. Carla thought I was going to work, but the truth was I had other plans. I called Letícia. She answered on the second ring. Javier, what happened? She asked, concerned. What happened? I replied sarcastically. Your daughter refuses to give me the divorce, Letícia. You should have made sure this didn't happen. Now we have a problem. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line before she responded. I'll talk to her, don't worry. But I knew Letícia didn't have control over Carla. She never did. That's exactly why she hired me. I decided to speed things up on my own. I went straight to a lawyer, bringing the contract and all the compromising documents I had gathered. The plan was simple. If Carla didn't leave me in peace, I would destroy her, and not just her. Letícia would pay the price too. When I returned home, Carla was on the couch drinking wine with Miguel. They were laughing loudly, as if they owned the world. As soon as I entered, Miguel made sure to provoke me. Look who's here. Our little guard dog. Aren't you ashamed to be so pathetic, Javier? Carla laughed and took a long sip of wine. Let him be, Miguel. Javier knows his place. He's only here because I allow it. That was the last straw. I kept my calm, but inside I knew that this would be the last day I would tolerate such humiliations. I went upstairs, grabbed a suitcase, and began packing my things. Carla appeared at the door a few minutes later, her face full of curiosity. What are you doing? She asked, crossing her arms. I'm leaving, I replied calmly. She laughed incredulously. Leaving? Don't be ridiculous. You'd never have the courage. I closed the suitcase and turned to face her. For the first time in 7 years, I looked her in the eyes without looking away. You're right, Carla. I never had the courage, until now. But know one thing. Your life will never be the same. She tried to say something, but before she could, I passed her and left the house. It was time to put my plan into action. This was just the beginning. As I walked out the door, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Carla watched me, incredulous, with her arms crossed and a look of superiority on her face. You're really leaving like this, she shouted from the door. Javier, be reasonable. You have nowhere to go. You'll come crawling back like always. I didn't respond, just kept walking to the car, carrying my suitcase. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. Inside, I could barely contain my smile. Carla thought I was the broken man she had humiliated for years. But little did she know, I had patiently waited for this moment. Everything was finally falling into place. In the following weeks, Carla tried to provoke me, sending sporadic messages, usually filled with irony and contempt. Are you still alive? Don't you think it's time to come back home and apologize? Miguel and I are doing great without you. I ignored them all. She had no idea my life was already completely different. I moved into a new house, much bigger than the one Carla thought was hers. It didn't take me long to settle in, with the millions Letícia had paid me over the 7 years. I invested wisely, real estate funds, stocks, and even a small business that was now thriving. While Carla thought I was just a doormat with no ambitions, the truth was I had accumulated a fortune that would leave her speechless. A month later, I decided it was time to put the plan into action. Carla and Miguel had organized a dinner for friends at the house I had lived in for 7 years. I made sure to show up, uninvited, of course. When I opened the door and entered, Carla looked stunned. She was laughing at something Miguel had said, but the smile disappeared as soon as she saw me. What are you doing here? She asked, clearly uncomfortable. I decided to come in and talk to you. My voice was calm, but it carried a tone that immediately caught the attention of everyone in the room. Miguel looked at me with disdain, as always. Listen, idiot. Nobody wants you here. Carla and I are doing just fine without you. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, I know you're doing fine, or at least you think you are. I pulled an envelope from my pocket and placed it on the table. But maybe you should take a look at this before you go on. Carla grabbed the envelope irritably, but as she read the contents, her expression shifted to pure panic. Miguel leaned over to read over her shoulder, and soon his look of superiority also vanished. What is this? He asked, confused. It's simple, I explained, crossing my arms. The house you're sitting in isn't hers. It never was. It belongs to my company. And, oh, Carla, remember the 7 years you treated me like garbage? Well, your mother was very generous in paying me millions to take care of you. I invested every penny, and look at me now. I'm a millionaire. You, on the other hand, have absolutely nothing. The silence in the room was deafening. Carla stood up, her face a mixture of rage and disbelief. This can't be true. My mother would never do this to me, she shouted. I laughed again. Your mother did what she needed to keep you from ruining your own life, and now she can't do anything about it. If she tries, I have enough proof to destroy her. And you? Miguel stood up, visibly uncomfortable. Wait, so you're saying that all of this? He pointed to the house. Isn't hers? None of this is mine. And I don't have any right to anything. Carla tried to argue. Miguel, don't be ridiculous. This changes nothing. We still have each other. He laughed bitterly, grabbing his jacket. I don't want to be with someone who has absolutely nothing and still relies on lies to stay afloat. Good luck with your life, Carla. I'm out. She tried to stop him, but Miguel left without looking back. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the room, leaving Carla standing alone, unsure of what to do. You can't do this to me, she screamed at me, but her voice now sounded desperate. I already have, I replied. And by the way, I'm buying this house from your mother. So, if you want to keep living here, you'll have to accept a new rule. Every morning, you'll have to kiss my feet. Carla turned pale, unable to respond. I left the house without looking back, leaving her to digest what had just happened. In the following days, Carla tried to get help from Letícia. She went to her mother's house, shouting and demanding explanations. Letícia, however, was tired of her daughter and her drama. I did what I could for you, Carla. If you lost your way, it's all your fault. Don't count on me to fix your mistakes. Without her mother, without Miguel, and without money, Carla finally understood what it meant to be humiliated. Today, she lives as a guest in the house I bought, following every condition I imposed. Every morning, she kneels, kisses my feet, and cleans every inch of the house. What was once a symbol of her arrogance is now the stage for her downfall. Every day that passes, Carla experiences what it's like to be despised, while I savor every second of my freedom. Justice, after all, was served.